What is her full name?
Reich Margit.
Reich Margit.
Reich.
R-E-I-C-H.
Please answer the questions which are going to be put to you by Mrs. Bach. In 1944, you, together with your husband, were in Budapest?
Igen.
Yes. We lived in Budapest.
When was your husband arrested?
1944. június 29-én.
On the 29th of June, 1944.
And when were you informed that he was transferred to Kistarcsa camp?
Én azt úgy tudtam meg, hogy elmentünk a tanácshoz, és ott tudtam meg.
I learned about it by when we went up to the Jewish Community Council.
Did you get a letter from your husband from Kistarcsa camp?
Kistarcsáról nem kaptam, csak amikor elvitték, akkor kaptam, akkor dobott ki a vagomból egy levelezőlapot és egy levelet.
From Kistarcsa I did not receive any letters, but when he was taken, I received one postcard
egy levelezőlapot és egy levelet.
and one letter.
After some time, a letter reached you, and it was known that the letter was sent from a train. Was that so?
Amelyen látni lehetett, hogy a vasútból lett kidobva.
Kidobva, igen.
Yes.
Where is the original of this card?
The original
De ha szükség van rá, én felhozathatom.
is in Budapest. Of course, if necessary, I can bring that postcard.
I'm going to show you a certain photograph. This is a photograph of that particular letter. Could you, of that particular postcard, could you identify it?
Ez a fénykép ábrázolja a levelezőlapot?
Természetes, csak veszek egy személynek.
Lapú van. Give me kaffee.
Igen, ez a férjem írása.
Yes. This is my husband's handwriting.
Could you tell the court what is written in this postcard? Perhaps the translator can read this postcard. There is no objection on the part of the prosecutor. The letter is written in Hungarian, replies the prosecutor to the question of President of Court. President of Court adds, could you give this postcard then to the translator? There is a German translation that might perhaps facilitate the task of the interpreter. The first...
Blessed be the hand which will deliver this postcard. And then there is an address, and on the reverse, my dearest, this is Wednesday afternoon. We were packed and we are leaving. May God be with you, my dear family. May God be with you. I embrace you, and many kisses, your father. And then there is a different handwriting thrown at the Karachon station. The card got wet, but it was delivered. this in a different handwriting.
You are confirming it. Yes, this is in Hungarian, and it is true. The text is exactly authentic. Apart from that postcard, did you get any other notice? Please, I should like to submit that document, adds the prosecutor. Is there another copy thereof? A reply, yes, I'm going to submit all the documents in my possession in this connection. This is T1184. Did you get any other sign of life, so to speak, on the part of your husband?
Még egy levelet kaptam, ezen kívül, a lapon kívül.
I received one more letter.
On what paper was that letter written?
Toalettpapírra.
On toilet paper.
Is that the letter in question? This is also in her possession. Could you ask her whether this is the case?
Én megkaphatom ezt a levelet.
I can produce the letter.
Do you recognize this handwriting?
El is olvashatom.
Yes, I can read it as well. I remember that it was also torn in the
How
same way
did
as
the
I
letter
did.
reach you?
Postán.
By mail.
És rá volt írva, hogy áldott legyen az a kéz, aki ezt a levelet bedugja.
It said again, blessed be the hand which helps to deliver this letter.
With the court's permission, I'm going to have it translated. If she so wishes, she could read it by herself, but I would like to spare her all the excitement.
Magát kimélni az izgalomtól.
Igen, megértem.
Kérni, mi námi.
All right, we're going to read the translation.
My dear wife and children, I already threw one postcard from the train. I am trying to write to you once again. No doubt we are out for a long journey, and may God help us that we meet again. There was one miracle on Saturday. Maybe God will help again. We could take nothing with us. What we have on the train is only a sack on our back. We are all in one wagon, 60. The destination is Germany. That is what we know, but maybe the German soldiers maybe they have erred. The way we are treated is sufferable. I will try to bear my fate. I do not wish to make you sad, but I do want to go on living with you. May God help us and this day come. Dear children, please take care of your mother. And dear wife, do take care of what we have. If I can, I shall write again. And until then, I embrace you with love. From this transportation train, Thursday at about 11 p.m.
I should like to... could you confirm the authenticity of this document and the correctness of the translation? The translator answers in the affirmative. This is T1149. This includes actually the aforesaid two letters. Also, the third letter answers the prosecutor.
Taken out of the town of about 3 or 4 kilometers in the top of a hill or beyond the hills.
נלקחתי אל קבוצה של עוד כ-25-30 צעירים, יחד עם אנשי הקבוצה הזאת, 25-30 במספר, קיבלתי תחילה מזון, אחר כך קיבלנו עיתים וכלי עבודה אחרים, והועברנו כ3-4 קילומטרים אל מחוץ לכפר, אל הגבעה, אל מאחורי הגבעות. מה עשיתם שם? What did you do there?
We have been taken up there and then told us to start dig ditches. First we believed that this is for the tanks, perhaps the Russians are coming back, and the size of the ditches had almost convinced us that this is what's going to be.
אמרו לנו לחפור, לכרות תעלות. תחילה חשבנו שתעלות אלו תהיינה מיועדות להיות תעלות אנטי-טנקיות. חשבנו שאולי יבואו הרוסים. גודל התעלות כמעט ושכנע אותנו שזאת הכוונה.
מי היו האנשים שציוו לכם לכרות את המכרות האלה? איזה מדים הם לבשו?
Who were the people who ordered you to dig those trenches? What uniforms had
they? They had the SS uniform and they had an SD on their sleeves, I believe.
היו אלה מדי SS ועל שרווליהם היו להם נדמה לי האותיות SD.
אתם קראתם להם באיזה שם? אתה יודע איך הם כונו?
Did you call them by name? Do you know how they were called?
No.
לא.
כן, ובכן, אחרי שחפרתם איזה בורות, מה קרה?
Well, after having dug some of those trenches, what happened next?
We finished one trenches at about late evening, I don't know the time, and the size of that trench was about 20 meters long on both sides and 5 meters wide and about 2 to 2.5 meters deep. And that night we were sent to our place to sleep. Before going to sleep they gave us some food.
באותו יום גמרנו חפירת תעלה, היה זה בערב בשעה מאוחרת, השעה המדויקת אינה ידועה לי. התעלה הייתה 20 מטר אורכה משני הצדדים, רוחבה 5 מטר, בעומק של 2 עד 2.5 מטר. החזירו אותנו למקומנו, ולפני ששכבנו לישון נתנו לנו מזון.
מה אירע למחרת היום?
What happened on the next day?
Next day we started to dig another trench until about late forenoon, when we saw 2 cars are coming to the place, stepping out very high-ranking SS officers, about 6 or 7 of them, and they were talking to our commanders and to our guards, and they were pointing. We could not hear what they say, but they're pointing toward the ditches or the trenches we digged.
למחרת היום שוב נלקחנו לחפירת תעלות, עבדנו בערך עד שעת הצהריים. שעה קלה לפני שעת הצהריים הגיעו 2 מכוניות, מהן יצאו קציני SS בכירים, כ6-7 במספר. הם דיברו עם המפקד, עם שומרנו, לא שמענו בדיוק מה היו הדברים הנאמרים, אולם הם הצביעו לעבר התעלות.
אבל נקצר, מר גורדון, לבסוף הובאו לשם אנשים, נכון?
To cut it short, finally people were brought there. Is that correct?
I beg your pardon?
To cut this short, is it correct to say that people were brought
Shortly
there?
after this, we saw the people coming up also with shovels and different tools in their hands, and there have been orders to lay down their tools. In the meantime, there were some German trucks coming up as well, having a clear mark on their side für die Deutsche Winterhilfe.
כן, הגיעו עוד אנשים ובידיהם עיתים וכלי עבודה, נצטוו להניחם. בינתיים הגיעו משאיות גרמניות מסומנות באופן ברור für die deutsche Winterhilfe למען מפעל הסעד החורפי הגרמני.
כן. שם הוצאו אנשים להורג, נכון?
Yes. Where people executed there.
These people were ordered to take off all their clothes, and they were put in orders, and then they were all naked. They were sent to these ditches, and the SS men, some of them drunk, some of them sober, and some of them photographing the scene. These people, numbering about 300 to 400, I don't know the exact number, were all executed, and most of them only get hurt and get buried alive.
האנשים שם נצטוו להסיר בגדיהם ולגשת לתעלות הללו. אנשי אס פיקחו על כך. אנשי אס בחלקם שטויים, אנשי אס בחלקם מפוקחים, ומהם גם עוסקים בצילום המתרחש. היו שם כ-300 עד 400 איש, וכולם נורו והוצאו להורג. אולם לא נהרגו, לא מתו מן היריות רובם, ונקברו חיים בתעלה.
הובא סיד כבוי, quicklime.
Quicklime was brought there.
Quicklime was there too, 4 or 5 trucks of quicklime.
מה קרה עם זה?
4-5 משאיות סיד כבוי הובאו לשם. What did they do with that?
First, after the shooting, we were ordered to put some earth back on the bodies. Some of them was crying still for help. We put the earth back on their bodies, and then the trucks were emptied of the quicklimes.
אחרי היריות ציוו עלינו עוד לשפוך אדמה על האנשים אשר בחלקם עוד צעקו לעזרה. לאחר האדמה נשפך הסיד הכבוי, רוקנו את המשאיות שהביאו סיד כבוי אל תוך התעלות.
מי היו האנשים שנורו שם?
Who were the people executed there?
They were mostly...
You can see the word Palestine here. Anyway, this is exhibit T1267.
1304.
Mr. Hausner, now your honors, our document 1304. It is a photostatic copy of the Mufti's diary of the 29th of September 1943. On page 5 it says subject, the Jews in Italy, France and Hungary, and who the expert in charge of Jewish affairs there is. Number 6 on the same date, Kaltenbrunner and Mr. Now your honors, our document 1304.
את המשאיות שהביאו סיד כבוי אל תוך התעלות.
מי היו האנשים שנורו שם?
Who were the people executed there?
They were mostly...
You can see the word Palestine here. Anyway, this is exhibit T1267. 1307. Mr. Hausner, now your honors, our document 1304. It is a photostatic copy of the Mufti's diary of the 29th of September 1943. On page 5 it says subject, the Jews in Italy, France and Hungary, and who the expert in charge of Jewish affairs there is. Number 6 on the same date, Kaltenbrunner and the meeting with him on Jewish subjects. The Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler has given His Eminence the Grand Mufti as a souvenir their joint photograph.
This is 1269.
It is exhibit T 1269. Judge Halevi, March 1943 is the date?
This is 1269.
It is exhibit T 1269. Judge Halevi, March 1943 is the date? Mr. Hausner, yes. Mr. Hausner, another picture of the two men, Himmler and Haji Amin, sitting both of them together.
T1271.
Judge Halevi, where was this found? In that same archive? Mr. Hausner, yes, also all of this. Judge Halevi, can the third person in the picture be identified?
Attorney General, no, I don't think so.
Attorney General, President of Court, as I said, the second picture is exhibit T1271. Now the Attorney General.
They were very friendly. On the 2nd of November, the day of the Balfour Declaration, the Reichsführer SS cabled the Mufti, saying, the National Socialist Movement engraved on its flag the fight and war against Jews all over the world, and therefore followed and watched the battle carried on by the Arabs, the seekers of freedom, especially in Palestine, against the Jewish invaders. Knowing this enemy and our joint war against them is the basis for the natural joint action against this people. And on this day of the unhappy Balfour Declaration, I send you my sincere greetings and to the coming true of your wishes and your victory. Signed, Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler.
Judge Halevi, what is the date? Which year?
According to all other indications, this must have been the year. To note the words in their original language.
Well, none of us were ever called people, Leute. This did not exist. This was the same with all SS people. Haufen, the pile. Every German used that expression, this word.
Judge Halevi, what does it signify, Haufen?
A garbage pile, a pile of manure, something like that.
And this referred to the prisoners, didn't it?
Yes, of course.
When were you liberated from Majdanek?
In 1944, the beginning of 1944.
As a Christian?
Yes, as a Christian.
You were called to the commander's office, and what were you told?
I was told, at first I thought that my end had come, because this was the way for hanging people usually. They would call them by the loudspeaker. My number was called and I was told to report in the office. There we stood for several hours. I saw some of the people, I knew some of the people who had been there, mainly Polish boys. There were no Jews among them. And then we were taken to a house. It was known as the Red House in Majdanek. There, this was the office of the administration. And an SS man came out who spoke Polish and told us that we were free. But first, we had to sign that we would never tell what we had seen.
When was that, the date?
It was in the spring of 1944.
Attorney General, was there a case of a Jew being released from Majdanek?
No.
That he was known to be a Jew and released. Was there such a case ever?
Never.
Dr. Savatius, any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Herr Zeuge, wann sind Sie zum ersten Mal zu der Überzeugung gekommen, dass Sie Eichmann im Lager gesehen haben?
Mr. Witness, when did you conclude that you saw Eichmann in the camp?
As I pointed out, it was in 1942, towards the end of 42. In this well-known roll call, which is very well engraved in my memory, where we had stood all night.
President of Court, you probably did not understand the question. When did it become clear to you? When did you know that this SS officer is Eichmann? Did you know that immediately, while the roll call was being on, or later?
It was immediately after we had dispersed and returned to the barracks. It was that day's topic of conversation that this was Eichmann.
President of Court, who said that this was Eichmann?
Well, I was in a group of Slovakians, Jews from Slovakia. I had a man right next to me. He knew them, and he even mentioned of the names of others whom he had seen, including Eichmann, because he was in the center of all these officers. One could easily distinguish that the other officers were less important, were not as high-ranking.
Dann verstehe ich Sie so, dass Eichmann an der Spitze dieser Offiziersgruppe ging?
So am I to understand that Eichmann was at the head of this group of officers? He headed the group?
Yes, he was surrounded by the others. There were about 10 of them. He was in the middle, and he marched at the head.
What was his uniform?
If my memory does not deceive me, this was a black uniform, because all the SS there wore black.
President of Court, this is not enough. Do you remember Eichmann's uniform? Not because all SS men wore black uniforms, you conclude that he also had a black uniform on.
The color of the uniform I do not remember so well, but I remember the other details.
Herr Zeuge, Sie hatten eben gesagt, es wäre eine schwarze SS-Uniform gewesen. Das war wohl Ihr erster Eindruck, den Sie auch jetzt noch hatten.
Mr. Witness, you just said that it was a black uniform. This must have been your first impression. And this is what you said here.
Well, I did not usually pay much attention to uniforms of all of these men. Generally, the face stuck in my memory. We always knew in advance about every SS man whether he was good or bad.
President of Court, I understood you to say or to mean as follows, and please tell me if I'm right or not. You know that all SS men wore black. That is why you conclude that the man who you say was Eichmann was also in a black uniform. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have no more questions to this witness. Judge Halevi, what did this commission do at Majdanek?
The commission reviewed the roll call.
Of the entire camp?
Yes, of the entire camp.
How many prisoners were at this roll call?
It's difficult to name a figure.
Usually, how many were there?
Play, which you mentioned, and what was its function?
The band was playing in one camp. This was in camp number 1. They were playing on all sorts of occasions.
President of Court, who were the members of the band?
Jews. When the transports were moving, then they would play. This was in our yard. Then they would play. Also, when the Germans would come, and they would tell us on certain occasions to dance, and we did dance.
Were you ordered to sing?
Yes, we were allowed to sing, for example, after a long day which started in the morning and was carried on until the middle of the night. Then the Germans would come and would say to us to sing. This could go on for hours. And if we were not singing properly, then we would have to sing again, and then it would be beaten up.
And you were ordered to sing for all these hours?
Untersturmführer Weiss. Once after work he came, and they would order us to stand at the roll call yard, and he would teach us words and a tune of 2 German songs. These were songs against the Jews.
Could you quote a typical verse or 2 from these songs?
The German song is quoted in German. It will be translated.
Stellen auf dem Wasser Seil, feststehen wie eine Felsenwand. Und die schmale Rinne, die ganze Judenschar drinne, macht die Klappe zu und alle Völker haben Ruhe. Jerusalem, Halleluja, Amen.
This was accompanied by all sorts of clappings and all sorts of movements, and this would go on for about 3 or 4 hours.
President of Court, turning to the stenographer, inquiring whether the stenographer had taken down the German words of the song.
Yes, I believe that there might be a slight error, but as a matter of fact, I could render it.
President of Court, what were the first verses? I'm sure it is not pleasant for you to do that, but nevertheless.
Give us Moses back. It started. To your brethren. The seas should be split again. And the billows should appear again.
Feststehen wie eine Felsenwand.
They're standing on the rock.
Und die schmale Rinne. Die ganze Judenschar drinne. Macht die Klappe zu und alle Völker haben Ruhe.
President of Court, to the official interpreter, could you now translate it into the Hebrew?
Oh,
give us back Moses. Restore Moses to his brethren. Let waters be split again, and let no, what he meant were waves, and let the billows appear again like steady rocks. And let the Jews fall into the depth, and let the waters close in.
President of
All
Court,
Jewry passes through that narrow strait, and the waters close in, and then the whole world, all the peoples would at last have peace. Jerusalem, Alleluia, Amen.
Mr. Hausner, was there another song which you had to recite about all the Jews being cheats and so on?
There is another song.
Could you just quote that one verse about the Jews being cheats and crooks?
Das hoffentlich mal. Von Israel abstamm ich, die Ehrlichkeit verdamm ich, 2 sind weiß, dann esse ich nicht von Schwein, ich bin ein Jude, weil ein Jude sein.
There was another song, I Come from Israel. The song started, I despise honesty. I do not eat pork. I am a Jew. I want to be a Jew.
Mr. Hausner, there were also horrible types of torture, weren't there?
It beggars all description. It is very difficult to relate about it now because it's almost impossible to believe it. I can tell you about one day out of all those horrible days we passed. This was the selection day. They would begin the selection of belongings, and we managed to bring all the belongings into one big pile, and the supervisor would come, and we saw that there was an open umbrella on a roof. This was about the height of 7 meters. One boy wanted to close it. He was ordered to close it and had to climb a building and fell down. But just because he fell down, he was given 25 strokes. This was at the height of 5 or 7 meters. An open umbrella was suspended. He was supposed to close it. And he fell down and was beaten to death. And they one said, I found among the Jews parachutists. This is what the SS men said. And then he would ask one man after the other to climb the rooftop and open the, and close the umbrella. As a matter of fact, almost all the people fell down, and each one who fell down was beaten to death. And the dog which was on the spot would accompany the strokes by his bites. And other people were shot on the spot, so that all the people who were working there would pass through that ordeal. Later on, they would invent other little games. There were, for instance, cases that people had to run and be shot at.
5 people were bound up, their trousers were bound with a rope, and they were filled with mice. Mice were stuck into the trousers, and they had to stand at attention. But of course they could not hold out. They were beaten horribly. And this is how it went on, and the Nazis amused themselves. And when this was over, there was one Jew, Paul, and other Germans called him Ivan the Terrible. Yes.
Ivan the Terrible.
Yes, that's what they called him. Half of his beard was shaved off, half of his head, and one of his eyebrows. A Jewish barber had to do it to him by instructions, and they always had to appear at the roll call, these 2 people.
Shaven, I understand?
Half shaven, yes, half of their face. And they tortured him horribly. I often heard him plead to be shot, but he was always brought back alive after all these tortures. And then they ordered him to go to this box office which they had, where they had the drugs, and they brought a few bottles of drugs, and he was made to drink the stuff. He became yellow and dropped as if he were dead. The German ordered for water to be brought and spilled over him. He was beaten, but he felt nothing. He was numb. This took almost all day, until the man again came to our camp, the Scharführer. He said that a boat should be brought, and people had to walk along that plank very slowly, step by step, and sing the march, the morning march. On that day alone, I don't know how many died, but I saw a few incidents with my own eyes. I think 5 or 6 people at least died within my eyes. I saw that.
What you saying?
And these tortures, I should like to say something else about it in general. They made animals out of us. People had to walk on all fours and bark. And there was one man who for several days, his function was to run all day like a dog on all fours and bark and grab at other people as if he were a dog. And they invented various things. In fact, they disrupted work through these so-called amusements. Often we just simply couldn't work. It couldn't be called work, it was just for their amusement.
Yes. To what unit these Germans belonged?
SS.
Do you remember one day on which they announced to you that there would be a visit of an important man?
I remember that.
And Himmler arrived. Do you remember that?
I do. I was then working with the Ukrainians. In fact, this has been talked about for 2 weeks. They had cleaned the camp very thoroughly. And there were preparations. Everyone knew that Himmler was about to come. All the workers in the camp did not go out to work on that day. It was forbidden for anyone to be seen out of our compound. But myself and others who had these similar functions, working with the Ukrainians, we stayed there. And I saw how a special train arrived. This was the first time that such a visit took place on such a scale. And there were several hundred people, maybe I'm exaggerating, but quite a large group came. And in the center, immediately we all looked to the center. Himmler was there.
How do you know it was Himmler?
I know because I looked in that direction. I knew he was coming. 3 was in a forest.
One thing I did not understand, you told us how the Germans tried to mislead the victims until the last moment, and then you told us that they tortured them. You told us about the preacher. How do those things, how can one explain them?
Well, in fact, the instructions apparently were to deceive the people until the last moment so that there would be no problems. But those local Germans wanted to torture them. For instance, there were transports where they would let the people eat and drink when they arrived. And they gave them letters and envelopes to send letters home. And in that courtyard where they were undressed, after the man preached, they had to clap hands. Not once. They clapped hands to these awful, cruel people. But in certain other transports, they continued torturing these people to the last moment.
Did the Germans drink and drink until they were drunk?
Yes, they did. I've seen some drunkards, and this was quite frequent.
Did you wish to add something? If it is important, will you please?
I wanted to describe a transport from Majdanek.
President of Court,
it was something special.
Attorney General, this was a transport on which skeletons arrived at camp. If the court permits, this will only take a minute. President of Court, you may add what you wanted.
Once a transport came from Majdanek. They were human skeletons, really. On that day, there was some kind of a malfunction apparently in the gas chamber, and they slept with us. They spent the night with us outside in the open on the courtyard. These people didn't care anything. They were beaten, they just sighed, they could not even speak. And we were ordered to give them some food, and we did. The last ounce of energy they spent on trying to get out. They were piled on top of each other, and they stepped on each other in order to get that crumb of bread which we could give them. And on the next day in the morning, they were taken to the gas chambers, and on the courtyard where they had been during the night, several hundred dead were lying there. And even there were those who were not quite dead, but they burned them. And then Frenzel came and selected 20 people, included myself, and said, "Don't worry, you have to undress and carry these bodies to the wagons, which were still in the courtyard, about 150 yards or something like that. They were not big wagons, small ones. It is difficult to describe what a feeling it was to be naked and carry these dead bodies on our shoulders. And the Germans egged us on, beat us to run faster. We had to drag them along, grab them by the feet and drag them along the ground. And it was a hot day. And I left the body for a moment, and I wanted to rest. And this man whom I thought to be dead sighed, and he sat up straight, and he said, "Is it far?" It was a very weak voice, must have been a supreme effort, and I could not carry him anymore. I raised him up, and I put his hand around my shoulder, and I was very weak myself. I couldn't go very far, but at a certain moment, I felt whippings, the whiplashes on my back. And the SS man beat me all over my body, and I let go of the body, and I again dragged the man to the wagons.
One last question by permission of court. Can you identify the man whose picture I'm showing you now?
Yes. That was the first camp commander.
What's his name?
Wirt. He was always riding a horse. He also had a colerina. He had a cape. He had this kind of cape, and he would ride around on his horse. He never approached us very closely, I should say. He always went to Camp 3 during the time when the transports arrived, and then rode back. He was there only for a short time. Then there came Hauptmann Herstleitner, I think. Hauptmann.
This is T1291, the exhibit, the picture shown to the witness. Will you please show it to Dr. Servatius? President of Court, Dr. Servatius, any questions in regard to the last words of that witness? I have no questions, Your Honor.
President of Court, thank you, Mr. Freiberg. You have completed your testimony. We shall stop now our next session this afternoon at 3:30 p.m.